What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weer. I love talking about movies, and today we are going to talk about the newest Martin Scorsese directed film, Killers of the Flower Moon. Now, Killers of the Flower Moon is a movie that I put on my most anticipated movies of the year 2023, and it's a movie that I was looking forward to all the way up until I saw that runtime of almost 4 hours, and I was like, I can't believe this thing's 4 hours long. But I did it. I soldiered through. I sat in my seat in the movie theater, didn't move, watched this movie from beginning all the way through the end credits, and I had a really good time with it. I think this movie is excellently made, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about it. But with that said, this is the last movie on my most anticipated movies of 2023 that I needed to see, so I just want to let you know that there will be a ranked list of those movies coming out very soon on my channel, where I talk about all the movies that I was excited for and how I rank them from worst to best. With all that said, let's do the review for Killers of the Flower Moon.
Don't do something you're going to regret for the rest of your life. I ain't got nothing but regret.
And so, guys, Killers of the Flower Moon is directed by Martin Scorsese. It stars Leonardo DiCaprio, it stars Robert De Niro, and it stars Lily Gladstone. And the movie takes place in the 1920s on the Osage Nation people's land, because on that land they found an abundance of oil. And with that oil comes so much wealth, and so now the Osage Nation, which wasn't really known for much, is now one of the wealthiest group of people in the world. But with that abundance of wealth comes an abundance of greed from William Hale, played by Robert De Niro. And William Hale is a man who has sunk his claws deep into this Osage Nation. He has gone around and he's made himself a friend to these people, and people love him and he loves them, supposedly. But what he really does is he creates schemes in order to get the money from these people. Like, for instance, he'll take out these very big health insurance policies on these people because he says he loves them and he cares for them, and he'll take these health insurance policies out on them. He'll have a doctor give them a clean bill of health, but really they're very sickly, and then they'll die, and he'll collect. And that's his main scheme throughout this movie. But another scheme he has going involves his nephew, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, Ernest Burkhart, in this movie. And Ernest is a man that just got home from the war. He thinks his uncle is a great guy. His uncle has people call him King. He's the nicest guy in the world. And his uncle's like, hey, I have something for you to do. I want you to be a driver. And specifically, he ends up driving around a girl named Molly, who's a Native American, part of the Osage Nation, and very wealthy because her land is very wealthy with oil. And so he ends up driving her around, they fall in love, and they get married. And while all of that seems like a nice love story that the two of them get married, it's really Robert De Niro behind the scenes pulling all of the strings, because his goal is to kill every single person in Molly's family, including Molly, have all that wealth transfer over to Ernest, and then eventually have that wealth transfer to William Hale. So that's the best setup I can give you for this movie. You basically have these women who are marrying these men, and then they die mysteriously. No one really investigates. The doctors are in on the pay, so no one really cares. And as these women die, their land rights go to the men that they married, and then these men just live off of that land, and they have a good time with it. And so someone has to step in, someone has to do something, and that will bring us to Molly Burkhart, again played by Lily Gladstone. She does a phenomenal job in this movie, and she finds a way to get to Washington and ask the FBI for help. With that said, if that sounds like a good setup for a Scorsese movie where it's kind of like a gangster but old Western as well, then I definitely recommend you check this movie out. I saw it in theaters, I recommend it in theaters, but at the same time, I completely understand if you decide, I want to wait for this thing to stream on Apple TV, because it is almost 4 hours long. With that said, let's get into my likes and my dislikes. The first like I have for this movie's got to be the acting. We got to start with Lily Gladstone. Her character of Molly is just emotional throughout this movie. She really brings the emotion into this movie. While you're seeing these other people scheme and do horrible things to each other, Molly really is the center of this movie, and I think that Lily Gladstone plays her character so well. You also, of course, have Leonardo DiCaprio, who is an Oscar-winning actor. He's fantastic in this movie. And you have Robert De Niro, who, in my opinion, gives his best performance in at least 10 years. This performance out of him is something straight out of Goodfellas. It's a fantastic sort of gangster role that he has, and he does such a good job with it. My next like for this movie is actually a two-part. It's the story and the runtime. Now, I know a lot of people probably throwing the runtime in their dislikes for this movie, but I actually think that the runtime fit this story very well, because while the story itself is very simple, and they basically give you the setup that I gave you in the first 40 minutes, you know where all the players are, and you understand what they're doing, how horrible some of them are, how Leo's kind of caught in the middle of all this, very easily seduced by power and wealth and greed. And then you have Molly, who's sort of standing up to all of this. So you have all that in the first 40 minutes. And then the rest of the movie, you're just watching this play out. And I saw some people say that as a negative, but I actually think that the runtime serves that story very well, because the story itself is not overly complicated or convoluted. So you're not, oh, well, then you got to get this guy's perspective. And then you got these 6 people who come in over here. I mean, you do have some people who show up toward the end of this movie, like Brendan Fraser, who does a great job, like John Lithgow, who plays a lawyer for the other side. Like, they do a great job bringing in some characters, giving great performances. But you don't have to worry about, oh, I got to understand all of this different stuff in the next 4 hours. No, it's very simple. It's given to you in the first 40 minutes, and then you just watch it play out over the next 3 hours. Works out really well. My only real dislike for this movie comes right at the end, which is too bad, because after almost 4 hours of watching, you really want to be satisfied at the end of that, right? And so you get right down to the end. You've got a courtroom scene with Robert De Niro's character on trial. You've got all these different witnesses, Leo involved in that, lawyers. They're all there. They're all giving their account of what happened throughout the events of this film. And you're like, okay, they're finally going to get this guy, and it cuts. And it jumps forward almost 20, 30 years. I'm not exactly sure the timeline there, but jumps forward to a radio dramatization of the events from that courtroom, or the events of those people at the end of their lives. And you're like, well, that's a weird way to end that story. I wonder why they're ending it like that. Like, they should have ended it with the actors. But then right when it's not making sense, Martin Scorsese himself stands up on screen and tells the story of what happened to Molly Burkhart after the events of that trial. And you're like, oh, so this is just Martin Scorsese being overly self-indulgent. Like, it's not, he had to have this 4-hour runtime, but then he wanted to be the one to tell you what happened. I don't know, for me, that just didn't really work. To put it in context, it's like if you watched Oppenheimer and you watched the whole movie where Oppenheimer and Einstein had this conversation that they allude to several times throughout the movie, and at the very end you see that conversation and it's this incredible payoff, and you're like, could be movie of the year. That is fantastic. That's a great way to end that movie. But instead of doing that great ending that they did, they had gotten all the way up to that scene, and then it cut, and they did a live dramatization of that scene, and Christopher Nolan stood up and said, and this is the conversation those two had. That was basically what that felt like. If Christopher Nolan had done that in Oppenheimer, that's would have been my biggest dislike for that movie. Whereas with this movie, I didn't mind the runtime. I thought it served the story well. I thought the story being built and being simple really worked for me. I liked the characters, loved the acting, and then you get right down to the end, and Scorsese's like, I'll handle this one. Yeah, so here's what happened, guys. And I'm like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you toss that monkey wrench into the very end? To me, didn't work at all. I didn't like that about this movie. So overall, I'll have to say that if you want to go see this movie in theaters, go ahead. It is almost 4 hours long, so good luck not running to the bathroom. But I would recommend you wait for this thing to be on Apple TV, because you could pause it there at least. At least there's something there. And for me, if you're going to have this almost 4-hour epic of a movie that's very moving and very real and historically accurate, that's great. But why would you pull the rug out from the fans at the very end and be like, oh, I'll handle it from here, guys? It just didn't work for me. But those are just my opinions, because that's my review for Killers of the Flower Moon. Now, guys, if you've seen Killers of the Flower Moon and you've got thoughts and you've got comments, maybe you've seen this thing and you disagree with me, you like the ending of the movie, let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts about this movie. And as always, guys, if you like this review and you want to see more, don't forget to hit the like button, because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we got to the end of the Killers of the Flower Moon review, and as I said at the beginning of this video, there will be a ranked video of all of my most anticipated movies now that I've finished that list, so be on the lookout for that. And in the meantime, if you want to check out any of my 2022 reviews, you can click right there, or all of my 2023 reviews are right there.